Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sattology means science of truth or study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which is a science of fake lie imagination or study of fake lie imagination. Nowadays, appearance is more important than the words or the character, which is a big irony of this world. But I have very, very special guest, a very good friend. We talk a lot of issues and he speaks on a lot of issues. Very popular, very, very popular. Without delay, let us welcome Abhijit Iyer Mitra.
Namaste.
Abhijit, the irony and the cacophony of the warmongers in the US and everywhere else seems to show that Ukraine has just become a pawn. What is your view on this?
Look, I'm not even sure that they are pawns. They're partially pawns, but a lot of it, they didn't become pawns unwillingly. Okay. The problem has been the levels of corruption and an extremely low caliber of public life in Ukraine, where everybody was only interested in their own personal profit. It's obviously become one of those situations where they needed to have an anti-Russia narrative to justify internal failure. This is natural, the worse you're doing economically, the more internal strife there is, the more resource competition there is more ethnic strife, there is more ethno-religious self-identification and separation from others, the othering of minorities, no matter how you describe them, whatever those minorities may be. So this was natural, and it suited America perfectly fine at that point of time. America and the West. Remember, this is not really a entirely an America-driven thing. I would say the fault, if you look at the West here, is 60% Europe, 40% America.
Now, all the sane voices from American media are regularly being blocked out. Like, for example, somehow the Tulsi Gabbard's message was so accurate, in line with the entire international assessment, neutral assessment, where the war is not going to help the Ukrainians. It doesn't help the USA. But the American politicians are now saying, Hillary said, it's a small price to pay for the freedom to pay $15 a gallon gas. $7 already in California, and somewhere it's $9 also.
So look, I believe that they should acknowledge their white privilege and their disproportionate wealth, and they should give up all their excess wealth and then say that $15 or even $7 or $9 per gallon is affordable. How much is Hillary Clinton worth? You tell me one member of Congress who's not a millionaire or is not a multimillionaire. Tell me one person in DC who works for the government, or anywhere who works for the government, who's not going to get a dearness allowance or a inflation adjusted pay package. Literally nobody. They're all going to get it. They're going to get some kind of a government subsidy. It's left, as always, for the ordinary man on the street to pick up the tab for the stupidity. So it's fine for Nancy and Hillary and all these people to come and say this. The reality is that when you're passing the buck onto the weakest sections of society, mind you, first of all, this city is designed around long-range commutes, where, in America, you can't really survive without a car, is an extremely unsustainable lifestyle. Yet you find that everybody who wants to talk about energy independence, moving to green energy, doesn't want to talk about the sheer environmental havoc caused by the nature of American cities, that is suburbia and these horrendous shopping areas where, like 10% will be dedicated to the actual Walmart, 90% would be dedicated to the parking areas and things like that. A car-driven lifestyle. Okay, totally unsustainable. But nobody wants to change that. There's all this compounding stupidity of the system where it's working essentially at cross purposes, and it's so riddled with contradictions and hypocrisy. I don't even know where to begin with this.
We had made Venezuela as a pariah. We did not want to buy oil from them. We made Saudi Arabia and UAE as a pariah. But now our presidents are calling, and the first time they are not picking up the phone call. What is going on over there? If you can tell the back.
Venezuela is desperate enough to receive that American delegation. I think the issue is going to be that because their oil sector is so completely wrecked, to recapitalize it is going to take a lot of time. I estimate about a year to 2 years to fully recapitalize it, by which time. And why would the Venezuelans agree to a subsidized oil rate with America? They now realize, what they say, the hearts and minds follow when you grab somebody by the balls. So Venezuela really has America by the balls. And if you can make the same money selling 5 barrels of oil, why would you sell 100 barrels of oil for the same profit? This thing, you wouldn't. So Venezuela has a great interest in controlling oil production right now because it can recuperate all the economic losses that it has suffered because of American sanctions. Number one. Number two, Saudi Arabia. Do you remember Biden was refusing to call Mohammed bin Salman? And he was refusing to pick up Mohammed bin Salman's calls. It was never officially announced that MBS was a pariah, but everybody understood that that's what MBS was going to be treated as by this administration. And sheer spite, it had Jamal Khashoggi had nothing to do with this. Okay, it was the spite of the establishment in DC that everybody in DC who claimed to be a Middle East expert or any kind of expert had been proven a complete idiot by Donald Trump, who they all claimed was a buffoon and this and whatnot, have name calling, what have you, who signed more peace deals between the Israelis and Arabs than the previous 10 presidents had combined. Okay, so this was problem number 2. Now, why would MBS suddenly pick up the call now that Biden is getting roasted over the fire? The Emiratis, they got punished differently. How did they get punished? America refused to supply the F-35s that the Emiratis had contracted for. And Biden basically put it under a security review, which is, we don't really trust you. Okay. Now, why should Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, or the Emirates bend over backwards to help America? Mind you, in 1986, they had helped America. In 1986, they had tanked the price of oil, brought it down to historical lows so that it would hurt the USSR's revenue stream, and it led in no small part to the economic collapse of the Soviet Union, which then led to the political collapse of the Soviet Union. Now, what is the interest on Saudi Arabia's part or the Emirates' part to do that now to Russia? Why should they do it? Especially for Biden of all people. So, this is what, when you end up alienating people, so many people simultaneously at the same time, it's all going to come back to bite you. And that's exactly what we're seeing at the moment. It's all coming back to bite Biden. Mind you, Russia is not coming out smelling of roses in this. Russia is going to go through deep, deep shit. The problem here is, I really feel, as much as I feel for the Ukrainians, I feel for the Russians. The people don't deserve this crap. And yet, the Russians, if you look at it, tell me, this is a country that has lost close to 100,000 people fighting over 15 years in Chechnya. Did they give up on Chechnya? No. Where is American casualties in Afghanistan? How many people dead in Afghanistan? 5,000, 6,000. compared to what 100,000 dead in Chechnya, and Russia didn't give up. This was a country that lost somewhere between 26 to 30 million people, depending on the whose calculation you accept, in World War II, and they won World War II. Remember, it wasn't the Americans who planted the flag on Berlin. It was a Georgian but Soviet soldier. I forget, Mileton Kantaria, who planted the banner of the Soviet banner of victory on the Reichstag. So, if you think that sanctions are going to bring Russia to heel, I doubt that very much. And at some point, there's this whole strategy that Zelensky's adopted of using his own people as human shields, which is disgusting. It is disgraceful. It lacks honor. It lacks humanity. A person who genuinely loved his country would go out the countryside and fight a guerrilla war, not drag them into the cities where the women, children, and infirm live. And why should we discriminate against men? Right? I mean, why is a 40-year-old man a legitimate target, but a 40-year woman is not a legitimate target? Everybody involved, it's a tragedy. So I think all these things are coming home to roost now. Let's see what happens. Nobody's the winner. Well, China's the net winner.
Now, in US is not part of international criminal system or international court of justice. US is not part of it. So the resolutions passed or any decision passed in that court is not applicable to Americans. So isn't that a very unjust world order in a way?
Well, no, it's like no country has to be a part of it. I think the only country that was forced to be a part of it was Serbia, who didn't have a choice in the matter because they got the living daylights bombed out of them. But I don't think India is a part of the ICJ either. The International Human Rights Court, at least. So no, it's not unfair, because international human rights, unfortunately, is run as an NGO racket. It has nothing to do with actual human rights abuses. It all has to do with the judges lining up post-retirement jobs.
Now, coming back to this conflict, and India's role has been beginning to be appreciated, that at least they rescue their own citizens. And in American quarters, there is a talk that even though we have the strongest military, but we do not rescue our own citizens from the conflict zones. Yemen was an example, Afghanistan was an example, and before that, even Vietnam was an example. And now Ukraine. Ukraine has 30,000 US citizens. Actually, they have dual citizenship in Ukraine. And there was also talk of the blue-green-eyed, a very racist talk, that if it was dark skin and they're not third world. So the first world and third world, don't you think that this has become like a racist block? The first world is a white world and the third world is a brown world.
But look, that's been the reality for such a long time now. Right? You take Russia itself. All right. Why wasn't Putin concerned about civilian casualties in Chechnya, but he's very concerned about civilian casualties in Ukraine? Right? He never considered the Chechens and Russians as one people, but he considers the Ukrainians and Russians as one people. Okay. Otherwise, the Russians would have flattened Kiev by now. We would have seen Tupolev Tu-160 bombers and Tu-22 bombers up in the air, carpet bombing the living daylights. If you look at the kind of bombing they've done in Syria or Chechnya, it's scary. They're not carrying out the same tactics in Ukraine. So it's not like Russia is any less racist. I think the problem is, the Russians have never admitted, have no issues in admitting they're racist. If you go tell them you're racist, they're like, yeah, we know, thank you very much. The problem with the West is they genuinely believe that they're not racist. Why is it that the nuclear bomb was used against Japan but not Germany? All the same rationale to prevent Russia from gaining the upper hand, or the Soviet Union from gaining the upper hand, to minimize Allied casualties. All the same things could have been applied to Germany as well. They weren't. So there's this fundamental that racism has always underpinned Western policy. There's nothing we can do about it.
Coming to the American media coverage, and barring one or two shows.
No, look, media coverage is a reflection of state policy in a sense. Okay. Uh, isn't it amazing that people in India keep saying Godi media, Godi media, Godi media, or sold out media? I have never seen a more sold out media than the American media, including Fox News, incidentally.
Now you correctly said it. They're all talking the drumming this thing. And what was the international reaction to American senators and congressmen trying for assassination of Russian leadership?
What's new about it? They've tried to assassinate several leaders. You look at the number of times they tried to assassinate Gaddafi, they tried to assassinate Assad, they tried to, especially the well-documented ones are the attempted assassination of Fidel Castro, right? We all know that the coup against Salvador Ali, and there was a CIA orchestrated coup, and ultimately Salvador Ali, and they was shot by Augusto Pinochet's forces. So either through coup or through direct assassination attempts, they've always been. Look, I can show you a few years back where everybody goes crazy that Russia tried to poison that defector in Britain, not once but twice. There was the Novichok poisoning, and then there was the polonium poisoning, right? So the nuclear poisoning and then the chemical poisoning. It's been caught on tape how many times Israel has assassinated its opponents, usually Palestinian terrorists, in Dubai, in Paris, in Norway, everywhere. Does anyone apply the same standards to them? No. America went in and killed Osama bin Laden. So, right. So there's never a standard. They keep saying rules-based order, rules-based order, rules-based order. It's just that nobody writes the rules. They just keep making the rules as they go along.
I mean, they're enjoying the ultimate military strength, and they're collecting the financial systems with which they control the whole world. Now, these sanctions...
Look, it was always explained to me. The law is the law when it is consistent in its application. The law shorn of consistency is tyranny. Okay. What we're seeing here is rules shorn of consistency. That's tyranny.
Now one like the sanctions on Russia by European Union and pretty much the white world, which are ex-colonialists. I've written in my book Gold, Glory, and God. Anyone can read it. They are still the West is the Christian, white, blue-eyed West. Rest everybody, even the US is not West. Like, if I get stranded somewhere with an American passport, I don't see any hope for me. Very clearly now.
No. So here we need to separate Christian from West. Okay. Because Rwanda is an overwhelmingly Christian country. Where was the West when Christians were killing Christians out there? The Rwandan genocide is the biggest genocide in the last 30, 40 years, right? So where was the West there? Does anybody give a damn about what happens in South America or even in Mexico for that matter? There was the Chiapas rebellion. Did you see anything happen? There was that. There were all those civil wars in all those Central American countries. Did you see anything happen? No. So even Christians in Africa, Christians in South and Central America, in Latin America, are treated like crap. The only thing that matters is Canada, America, Western Europe, including, Italians. If you go to the South, they're not really white, blonde hair or blue-eyed or anything like that. Greeks are not blonde-haired, blue-eyed. Cypriots are not blonde-haired, blue-eyed, but that would still count for more than this geography. It's not even the blonde hair and blue eyes. It's a certain geography of mutually identified connection. All right. Where certain standards apply which does not apply to the rest of the world.
True. So the sanctions on Russia, like including Microsoft and Google apps, which we think that untouchable, they're all touched now.
Yeah.
And like all trust is literally broken, like of the world. I'm sure Indian planners must have looked at it, because this is a big thing. If something happens to India, or and US go on the opposite side, large economies like India, they cannot sustain. So what is going to be the long-term impact of these sanctions on the world psyche? And before that, the policies start coming in after that.
Look, I think the biggest thing now is, I think the rest of the world realizes one of two things. Either you play along with this North Atlantic game, or you're going to be cut out of the system. In the medium term, it is going to breed more compliance on the one hand, but it's also going to breed more resistance on the other hand. Okay, wherein you will literally, I know for a fact that the government of India has ordered certain things. I'm not going to talk about it ever in public, has ordered certain extremely important things to be done within the last 4 to 5 days, which will create massive redundancies, that the kind of sanctions that have been imposed in Russia, if it were ever to be imposed in India, it would hurt us, yes, but there will be a certain redundancy to it. I think one of the first things you're going to see is forced data localization. All the data majors, Facebook, that is to say Meta, Twitter, Amazon, Google, they will all be forced to localize data. This is almost a certainty now after what they've done. And guess what? That means that the price of doing business just went up exponentially for all these companies. So they're going to get their comeuppance. They are going to get their comeuppance. It's just a matter of time. But I think when Klaus Schwab and the WEF claimed that there was going to be the Great Reset, I don't think the Great Reset is going to their plan at the moment.
You're absolutely right. Even Indian Americans and people who have accepted this country, adopted this country as their home, are worried now, because nothing is like what happened to the Russian oligarchs who are American passport holders. It's a stark reminder that everything can be revoked, everything, including the passport, which was considered very permanent. Now, so in that scenario, India, you already said, do you think the other nations which are now running towards either China or India or Russia will be also forced to take such steps, including Saudis and UAEs have approached India now because they are worried about their future in such an scenario?
I think every country that can pull its weight. Okay, so say Tuvalu, Seychelles, Mauritius. I don't know if your audience have even heard of Mauritius, Seychelles, Tuvalu, and the Federated States of Micronesia. They might not have the guts to do this or the ability to do this. But I can tell you, every small to medium-sized country worth its weight, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, India, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, they are all within the next 5 years or so going to insist on certain redundancies being implemented in their country, where Google, Facebook, all these software companies, their business case is going to go kaput. Well, not entirely kaput, but the cost of doing business is going to go enormously up, because they will have to duplicate infrastructure across every single one of these political geographies. So they're going to get what they deserve.
It's called tech colonialism. Now, coming to the financial colonialism, where
Okay, I don't like this term colonialism, right? I know people use it, but decoloniality and colonialism, for me, it's just gobbledygook. Okay, everybody does colonialism. India used to do internal colonialism as well. right? I don't think the Chola rule of Sri Lanka for 300 years under the Cholas from about 900 AD to about 1100 AD was a bed of roses. India, the Chola Navy went and destroyed the Srivijaya Empire and reduced them to penury in Malaysia. So I don't think, this. I don't know why Indians are so fascinated with colonialism. It's just other people doing to us what we've done to other people at different points of time. It's just that industrialization makes the efficiency of the extraction process much more streamlined and effective.
Good point. Because colonialism, we use it just to counter the academic apartheid. We use that extensively. Now, the when you talk about the financial systems being taken away, which the whole world is dependent on, and which is a big risk to even you Indians, even us, Chinese, everybody else who is transacting in dollars. What is the like the because you see the whole world in a different way. What do you think the whole world is thinking right now? Whether they can depend on it? Like I tell you one thing, one of my companies does international trade, and they are dependent on Swift, and there is a requirement of G7 banks only, G7 banks only, because the American bank doesn't accept anything other than G7 banks, not even G20, G7. So or G6 or whatever it is, G7 now. So what do you think? What is going on in their minds, including India, that this is a risk right now?
Well, look, India had anticipated this quite some time back, which is why we came up with UPI, which is your own internal payment system and things like that. And we have an internal, equivalent of SWIFT just domestically, which can be very rapidly internationalized. And you can literally tell banks, international banks operating in India, that you will bloody well accept this system that we use domestically, internationally as well. And if they want to continue working in India, like Standard Chartered or HSBC or Standard Chartered or Bank of America, what have you, that you will have to use these numerals, they will be forced to do it, right? So there's nothing much that you can. There's a lot that we can do. The question is how smart we are about doing it.
No, there's a talk of sanctions now, which is very active by the Democrats to put on India, including military embargoes to that extent. And
best of luck. I'm kind of hoping that does happen, because what America will be doing is the last 30 years of coming closer together would literally be destroyed in one day. Okay, do it. I would really encourage America to impose those sanctions.
That first test was done when the US Navy ship entered into Indian water near Lakshadweep.
Well, not really. They've been entering Indian waters for a very long time. They just haven't been announcing it publicly, because you know how the saying goes: friends disagree in private, enemies disagree in public. Okay, so America has been doing FONOPs, freedom of navigation operations, entering Indian waters for the last 20 years regularly. The thing was, it was like, it was, look, I'll come into your waters, we'll just keep it between ourselves, so then China can't accuse me of favoritism, that I'm only prodding them, why am I not prodding you, and things like that. So it was mutually agreed. This time also, that American ship coming in, was it intercepted by an Indian ship? No. Our thing was, we want freedom of navigation as a counter to China. Okay. Now, America went ahead and announced it, which was publicly humiliating us and forcing us to react to it. Which was one of those things, like I said, why do it in public? Right? So it wasn't something new, it was just the announcement was new.
The last question just come from the audience now. Forcing American people to, is a question by Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. So the question is, forcing Americans, and believe me, people are loving this conversation of ours, Abhijit. I've got so many thumbs up, I can't even count right now. So the forcing Americans to pay higher gas prices and moving them, forcing them to move towards electronic vehicles. Now, is that a ploy to make everything electrical so that people can in USA can be controlled? I have always felt that Americans are the biggest guinea pigs of the whole world. Everything gets tested on Americans first and then exported, including the Coca-Cola poison. So your
So
views on that?
remember, uh, the people who raised the bill to ban fossil fuel imports, Russian fossil fuel imports, were the Republicans. So understand what happens out here. If the price of energy goes up, the Democrats benefit in that it will force a shift to electric vehicles, the world leader of which is Tesla, whose owner Elon Musk is an avowed Republican. Okay, again, the alternative when those prices rise is to return to fracking, which suits Republicans fantastically well. This is called a uni-state, where you have the impression that there are two sides going hammer and tongs at each other, but both are invested in the same decision because they expect the policy outcomes to be different. One will say that, one feels that the most natural, quick, implementable solution will be a return to fracking because the infrastructure already exists. The other will see electric vehicles, even though it's a more longer term thing because whole of America can't just switch to electric vehicles overnight. Plus, how will all these companies scale up production? Even if everybody lined up to buy an electric car tomorrow, how will Tesla or Rivian or Lucid scale up production? And what is the cost of those cars? The Rivian and the Lucid cost a heck of a lot of money. Tesla's cost a heck of a lot of money, right? Where are your second-hand $3,000 Honda Accords that students buy from second-hand lots? You will not get that, right? So it will change the entire lifestyle pattern. I personally feel a return to fracking would probably be the near-term panic reaction to all of this, in which case the Republicans win. So understand the Republicans also have an agenda in this. It's not like they're the Virgin Mary, completely faultless and blameless.
How do you come up with that logic? That's a good one. Okay, Michelle has another question for you. So the students generally they are worried that their life will be controlled when everything goes electric because it can be 5Gs can literally control every aspect of their life, including movement.
Correct. And that, remember, that is the goal. There is video after video after video of the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab and everybody who attends the World Economic Forum, who's part of the German alumni of whom are part of the German cabinet, of the Canadian cabinet, of the American cabinet, etc., who claim the whole point is to give up control to the state. I mean, how many times do they have to say it in black and white for you to accept that? Right? Because the more digital you are, the greater the ability to monitor and control. It's the most natural thing on earth.
We have seen that amply with all the digital commerce and social media. The last question from Claire, we have to take this. Claire is the scholar cum laude of Howard. Okay, so she has a question that given this kind of objective which you just mentioned, what is the role of students and people who are helpless in countering this?
The role of students and people is, look, a lot of you are going to be casualties when you speak out. But I think this is the big new civil rights movement. What we need is a new Dr. Martin Luther King. Okay, not a race Dr. Martin Luther King, but a civil rights Dr. Martin Luther King, a digital rights Dr. Martin Luther King, who invariably will come up and will challenge this tyranny. But I would say prepare for things like Selma, a digital Selma. Okay. Prepare for the equivalent of, well, the digital age equivalent of lynchings to crush that civil rights movement. But this is not going to be an easy fight, boss. It's going to take at least 10, 15, maybe 20 years. But it is a course of action whose value will be seen over time. And it will only increase over time. The more misery that socialism brings to people, the more people will turn against it. Or maybe they won't, like in Venezuela. The more they were losing, the more they tended to vote for, Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro. I hope. I hope for the former. I prepare for the latter.
So are we like as an American society, are we becoming more socialist, communist than ever before?
America is destroying itself. Okay. That's what's happening. Yeah. America is going to go the Venezuela way ultimately. Venezuela minus the sanctions.
Thank you so much, Abhijit, for a frank conversation, and also for all the audience for asking very good questions today. I know this show today touched your hearts with what's going on. And thank you, Abhijit, for putting a global perspective to many of these people who don't hear it from their own media. And for the first time, we are the only channel now today. We have captured the global essence. You spoke few words, but it had a lot of meanings, deep meanings. And thank you for sharing that. And one thing I must say, both Democrats and Republicans apparently are united in not putting sanctions on India. But I think the sanctions might happen in a different way, and which will be we have to see now. This is just my assumption, but I may be wrong. So I'm not a political person, so please don't ever take my word seriously on anything political. And Abhijit is the right one to answer that. That's why I bring Abhijit is the one who answers these questions. Abhijit.
I'm not a political person. I'm a shit stirrer. I'm a professional shit stirrer.
Anyway, so we both clarified our stand, so don't blame us anytime. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Abhijit. Always a pleasure. And thank you for all of you for watching it live. Do comment and let us know your feedback.
Live long and prosper. Slava Ukraina, Slava Rasi, Rasi Ukraina, Bratya.
Thank you.